Sit down, Emma. Your little ideas are just trash and not fit for this boardroom. Diane's voice didn't just cut through the silence of the room. It sliced through the last remaining piece of my dignity. She smiled, a cold, calculated expression that didn't reach her eyes, as she slid my quarterly marketing presentation across the polished mahogany table. The pages scattered, fluttering like wounded birds before settling onto the floor. 6 executives sat around us. Men and women who used to smile when I walked into the room. People who used to eagerly text me on weekends just to get my early feedback on their projects. Now, not a single one of them would look me in the eye. They suddenly found the texture of their expensive notebooks incredibly fascinating. "We are going with my strategy instead," Diane announced, her voice dripping with artificial warmth as she looked at the investors. "My late son was a visionary, but he was sentimental. He let his emotions cloud his business judgment. Maxco needs structure now, not creative experiments from someone who used to struggle just to pay her monthly rent." The sting of her words burned fresh, but the mention of Max made my heart physically ache. It had only been 3 weeks since the plane crash, 3 weeks since the man I built a life with, the man who held my hand through every sleepless night, vanished from this earth. I hadn't even had time to properly cry, to sit in our quiet house and let the grief wash over me. Instead, I was forced into a tailored suit, fighting a daily war for the survival of the company we built together from a cramped, drafty one-room office. "Diane, this regional advertising campaign has been in development for 6 months," I said, keeping my voice level, though my hands trembled beneath the table. "Max and I personally approved every single phase. If you change the public messaging now, you will alienate our core users. The entire system relies on that emotional connection." "The system relies on profit, Emma," she snapped, leaning forward. "And right now, you are an expensive luxury this board no longer wishes to indulge. You are dismissed from this presentation." I looked around the room, hoping for a single ally. Nothing. Just blank, corporate stares. They had already chosen their new queen. They thought I was just the lucky employee who managed to marry the boss. They forgot that before I was Max's wife, I was the architect of Maxco's public identity. I stood up slowly, gathering my scattered papers from the floor. As I bent down, Diane whispered just loud enough for the front row to hear, "A maid can wear a silk dress, but she still belongs in the kitchen." A quiet ripple of laughter echoed through the room. My face burned with intense humiliation, but I didn't cry. I walked out of that boardroom with my head held high, the heavy glass doors clicking shut behind me. They thought they had stripped me of everything. They thought because Max was gone, I was completely defenseless. But as I walked down the long carpeted hallway toward my office, a strange sense of calm settled over my grief. Diane wanted to run the company her way. She wanted to erase Max's legacy and install her own rigid, aggressive corporate model. What she didn't know was that Max had anticipated her cruelty long before he ever boarded that fateful flight to Singapore. In my desk drawer, beneath a stack of old sticky notes and memories, lay a black leather folder. Inside that folder was a legal document Diane didn't know existed, a document that gave me the ultimate power to halt any major corporate shift, but only if the company's internal operational health dropped below a certain threshold. Diane was about to launch her new aggressive strategy tomorrow morning. She thought she was stepping into a triumph. In reality, she was walking straight into a trap of her own making, and I was going to sit back and watch the entire empire crumble before I lifted a single finger. Before we move on to how I handled Diane's massive corporate takeover, I want to welcome you to the channel. If you love powerful revenge stories where the underdog finally wins, please take a brief moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. It really helps me bring more of these satisfying stories to you. Also, I love knowing who is listening tonight. Where in the world are you watching this from? Let me know in the comments below. The next morning, Diane's new corporate machine roared to life. From my corner office, I could hear the unusual buzz of panic echoing down the corridors. She hadn't just modified our existing regional strategy, she had completely gutted it. By 9 in the morning, her hand-picked management team had sent out an emergency mandate to all regional branches, demanding an immediate freeze on our signature customer loyalty programs and a 20% price hike across all platforms. She wanted fast, aggressive numbers to show that the board of directors at the end of the month. She wanted to prove that Max's empathetic, people-first approach was an amateur mistake. I sat quietly at my desk, holding a lukewarm mug of black coffee, watching the internal system metrics on my computer screen. The digital dashboard began flashing amber indicators. These were the early warning signs of system friction. When you abruptly change the terms of service for millions of loyal users without warning, the foundation begins to crack. Suddenly, my office door swung open without a knock. It was Marcus, our lead regional coordinator. He looked pale, his tie slightly askew, clutching a tablet to his chest. He was one of the few managers who had stayed up late with Max and me during the early startup days, but yesterday in the boardroom, he had looked at the ceiling to avoid my eyes. "Emma," Marcus stammered, closing the door quickly behind him. "We have a massive problem. The regional customer service hubs are getting flooded. Users are canceling their premium subscriptions by the thousands because of the sudden price adjustment. The automated system isn't designed to handle this volume of contract terminations." I took a slow sip of my coffee, looking at him with a completely calm expression. "Did you take these concerns to the acting chairwoman, Marcus?" He swallowed hard, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I tried. Diane told me that anyone complaining about a minor price adjustment is an unprofitable user we don't need anyway. She ordered the technical team to manually override the automated support queue to hide the backlog from the main dashboard." A cold smile touched my lips. Diane was a politician, not an operator. She truly believed that business was just about giving orders and looking authoritative in a luxury suit. She didn't understand that a company like Maxco was a living, breathing ecosystem. By forcing the tech team to manually bypass the support queue, she was essentially putting a piece of tape over a check engine light. "Then I suggest you follow the chairwoman's instructions, Marcus," I said softly, leaning back in my leather chair. "But Emma, if the regional queue stays blocked for more than 48 hours, the main server architecture will automatically flag it as a critical system failure," Marcus pleaded, taking a step closer to my desk. "The automated merchant processors will pause our daily transaction settlements. You know how the architecture was built. You and Max designed the operational flow." "Max and I designed it," I corrected him, my voice dropping to whisper. "But yesterday, the board decided that my presence was an expensive luxury. Diane publicly stated that my insights don't belong in a real boardroom. So I am respecting her authority. I am staying out of it." Marcus stared at me, the reality of the situation finally dawning on his face. He realized that I wasn't just hurt, I was detached. He realized that the one person who knew how to balance the delicate relationship between our infrastructure and our users was intentionally stepping aside. "You're going to let it fail," he whispered, horrified. "I'm letting Diane run the company her way," I replied, looking directly into his eyes. "Isn't that what everyone in that boardroom wanted?" He couldn't answer. He turned around and left my office, closing the door quietly this time. Left alone in the silence, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out the black leather folder Max had given me months ago. I opened it and turned to page 12. There, in clear black ink, was a legal clause typed out by our private attorney. It stated that if the company's regional operational efficiency rating fell below 70% for 3 consecutive business days due to management adjustments, full emergency administrative control would automatically revert to the designated operational director. And that director wasn't Deanne. It was me. By the second day of Deanne's new regime, the atmosphere inside the corporate headquarters had transformed from anxious to suffocating. I didn't leave my office. I didn't need to. The frantic footsteps echoing outside my door told me everything I needed to know. Employees walked past my glass walls with their heads down, holding stacks of internal error logs, rushing toward the executive suite on the top floor. Deanne had officially locked herself in the main boardroom with her chosen consultants. They were trying to force a broken strategy to work through sheer administrative pressure. At noon, my assistant Sarah slipped into my room, looking incredibly stressed. She was a young woman I had hired fresh out of college, and she was the only person in the building who still showed me genuine loyalty. She quietly placed a tray with a small salad and a fresh glass of water on my desk. "The regional directors from the western branches are trying to reach you on your private line, Emma," Sarah whispered, leaning over the desk. "They say Deanne's team isn't answering their priority calls. The regional payment portals are starting to lag, and merchants are demanding to know why their daily settlement funds are being delayed." "Did you redirect those calls to the chairwoman's secretary, Sarah?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. "I did," Sarah nodded, biting her lip, "but their secretary told them that Diane's is currently in a high-level meeting with external investors and cannot be disturbed by routine operational anomalies. Emma, they are calling it a routine anomaly, but the internal system dashboard is almost completely dark. Everyone is terrified." "Let them be terrified," I said, looking out the large glass window. "When you build a house on a weak foundation just to make it look grand from the outside, you shouldn't be surprised when the walls start to lean." "Are you going to help them if they ask?" Sarah asked softly. "Nobody has asked me, Sarah. In fact, I was explicitly told that my sentimental ideas don't belong here," I replied, opening my laptop to monitor the public user forums. The public reaction was already becoming vicious. On social platforms, thousands of longtime users were posting screenshots of their frozen accounts and the automated error messages they received when trying to access our services. The community that Max and I spent years nurturing with transparent communication and fair policies was turning into an angry mob within 48 hours. They felt betrayed by the sudden corporate greed, and they were pointing their anger directly at the current management. Deanne truly believed that our users had nowhere else to go. She thought the brand name alone was enough to keep them trapped. She didn't understand that digital loyalty is incredibly fragile, built entirely on trust and consistency. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the communal break room to get a fresh bottle of water. As I passed the main administrative pool, I saw Deanne's standing over a group of junior analysts. Her face was flushed red with anger, her expensive diamond necklace catching the harsh fluorescent lights as she gestured aggressively at a computer screen. "I don't care about the system lag," Dianne shouted at a young analyst who looked like he was on the verge of tears. "Manually clear the transaction backlog and post the projected revenue numbers for the third quarter. The investors are arriving in exactly 2 hours, and I will not show them a dashboard filled with red warning indicators." "But ma'am," the analyst stammered, his hands shaking over the keyboard, "if I manually clear the validation queue without checking the settlement balances, we could face a massive reconciliation deficit by tomorrow morning. The system needs a temporary operational pause to self-correct." "There will be no pauses," Dianne barked, slamming her hand on the edge of the desk. "You will do exactly what I ordered, or you can find a new job by 5 o'clock. This company runs on my schedule now." She turned around sharply, her eyes instantly locking onto mine as I stood by the water dispenser. The anger on her face quickly melted into a smug, triumphant grin. She walked over to me, her high heels clicking loudly against the tile floor, stopping just a few inches away. "Enjoying your vacation, Emma?" she asked, her voice dripping with venomous sarcasm. "You see, the company functions perfectly fine without your emotional theories. We are expanding our profit margins by tomorrow morning, with or without your approval." I looked at her, noticing the tight lines of exhaustion around her eyes that her expensive makeup couldn't completely hide. She was running on pure adrenaline and pride, refusing to admit that she was drowning in a current she couldn't control. "I hope the investor presentation goes exactly how you deserve, Dianne," said softly, giving her a calm, polite nod. She let out a cold, sharp laugh. "Oh, it will." And once the new capital is secured, the board will have the financial leverage they need to buy out your little remaining contract. Enjoy your final days in this building, dear. Your time is officially up. She turned on her heel and swept back toward the executive elevators, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume in her wake. I watched her go, then took a slow sip of my water. I knew something she didn't. The manual override she had just forced that analyst to execute was the exact trigger our system needed to initiate a critical administrative lockdown. The clock on my office wall ticked steadily toward 4 in the afternoon. The silence inside my room felt heavy, almost holy, compared to the rising panic right outside my door. Through the large glass partition, I watched the corporate offices descend into absolute chaos. People were no longer walking. They were sprinting between cubicles, clutching printouts of system reports, and speaking in frantic, hushed tones. The digital countdown Diane had inadvertently started when she forced that junior analyst to override the validation queue was reaching its final minutes. Sarah entered my office without knocking, her face completely drained of color. She didn't even try to hide her panic this time. She closed the heavy wooden door behind her and leaned against it, breathing heavily as if she had just run up 10 flights of stairs. "Emma, it's happening," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "The regional merchant processors just completely severed our connection. Because the validation queue was manually cleared without balances, the financial network flagged our main corporate account for suspicious activity. They have frozen all incoming and outgoing transaction settlements across every single territory." I placed my coffee mug down on the desk with a soft clink. "Every single territory, Sarah?" "Yes," she nodded rapidly, her eyes wide. "We can't process payments. Users can't access their premium features. The regional partners are receiving automated notifications stating that Maxco is under an immediate administrative audit due to operational irregularities. Diane is still in the boardroom with the international investors. They've been in there for 45 minutes. Then she is currently pitching a dead machine," I said, a cold sense of justice settling deep in my chest. At that exact moment, the lights in the main administrative pool outside flickered slightly, and a low, rhythmic chiming sound began to echo from the ceiling speakers. It wasn't a fire alarm. It was the internal infrastructure warning chime. It only activated when the main operational efficiency dropped below the critical 70% threshold Max and I had programmed into the system core. On my laptop screen, the dashboard changed from a chaotic mess of amber indicators to a single solid crimson block. The text read, "Systems infrastructure degraded. 72-hour automatic administrative lockout initiated." Suddenly, the heavy glass doors of the executive boardroom flew open at the end of the hall. Diane marched out, surrounded by 4 wealthy international investors in tailored gray suits. Her face was a mask of professional composure, but I could see the subtle twitch in her jaw and the way her fingers tightly gripped her gold leather folder. Behind her, the chief financial officer followed, looking like he was about to physically faint. "It's just a minor technical update sequence, gentlemen," Diane was saying loudly, her voice projecting across the open floor as she tried to guide the investors toward the elevators. "Our digital platform is simply migrating to a more profitable structure. There is absolutely nothing to be concerned about. My team will have the main displays restored in a matter of minutes." One of the investors, an older man with sharp gray eyes and a stern expression, stopped dead in his tracks right outside my office glass wall. He pointed a finger at a large wall monitor that usually displayed our global active user count. The monitor was currently frozen on a stark red error screen. "This doesn't look like an update sequence, Diane," the investor said, his voice cold and precise. "My associates are checking their personal devices. The regional user forums are completely melting down. There are reports that our primary financial processing accounts have been flagged for fraud validation. We came here to invest in a premium tech-driven logistics brand, not a corporate structure that collapses during a routine meeting." "I assure you, Arthur, everything is under complete control," Diane pleaded. her usual arrogant tone completely dissolving into a desperate, high-pitched whine. She turned around fiercely to face her chief financial officer. "Fix this immediately! Why is that display screen red? Bring the main numbers back online right now." "I can't, ma'am," the CFO stammered, his voice cracking so loudly that half the floor stopped to look at him. "The automated system has entered an administrative lockdown because of the manual queue clearances from this afternoon. The infrastructure is completely locked. No one in this building has the clearance code to override a critical system degradation event." Diane's eyes widened in sheer horror. She looked around the panicked floor, her gaze desperately scanning the faces of her hand-picked managers, her expensive consultants, her loyal executives. Every single one of them looked down at the floor or stepped back. They had the fancy titles and the massive salaries she had given them, but not a single one of them knew how the machine actually functioned. Then slowly her eyes traveled across the room and locked onto me through my open office door. I was sitting calmly behind my desk, holding a printed copy of the legal folder Max had left behind, watching her final desperate moments with a serene smile. She knew. In that exact second, she realized that the only person who could save her from total public ruin was the woman she had mocked just 24 hours ago. Diane stood frozen in the center of the chaotic floor for what felt like an eternity. The sharp, rhythmic chiming of the system warning system continued to echo from the ceiling speakers, a steady metronome marking the countdown of her corporate execution. The 4 international investors exchanged grim looks, whispering quietly among themselves as they watched her composure completely disintegrate. With a tight, forced smile that looked more like a grimace, Diane turned to the investors. "Gentlemen, if you will excuse me for just one moment. I need to consult with our core operational strategists." She didn't wait for their response. She turned on her high heels and marched straight toward my office, her movements rigid with a mixture of fury and absolute desperation. Her hand-picked managers parted like the Red Sea as she passed, none of them daring to make eye contact with her. She stepped into my office and slammed the heavy wooden door shut behind her, cutting off the noise of the panicked floor. She stood there, chest heaving, staring at me as I calmly turned a page in my legal folder. "What did you do, Emma?" she demanded, her voice a harsh, low hiss. "You did this intentionally. You manipulated the system to make me look incompetent in front of the largest investment group in the region." I slowly looked up from my documents, leaning back in my chair with complete composure. "I didn't do anything, Diane. In fact, for the last 48 hours, I have done exactly what you and the board ordered me to do." I sat down, kept my mouth shut, and stayed completely out of your boardroom affairs. "Don't play games with me," she snapped, stepping closer to my desk and slamming her manicured hands onto the polished wood. "You know how to turn that red screen off. You know how to bypass an administrative lockdown. My CFO says the entire regional network is frozen. Fix it right now." "That is an executive order." I let out a soft, gentle laugh that seemed to infuriate her even more. "An executive order?" "Diane, yesterday you told me that my creative experiments were an expensive luxury and that I was dismissed. You told this entire office that a maid belongs in the kitchen, remember? If I am just an unqualified employee who got lucky, how could I possibly fix a massive regional infrastructure collapse?" Her face turned a deep, mottled red, but beneath the anger, I could see the cold terror taking root in her eyes. She looked out the glass partition. The investors were already picking up their briefcases, checking their watches, and moving toward the exit. If those men walked out of the building without signing the partnership agreement, the company's stock would plummet by tomorrow morning, and the board would hold her personally responsible for the financial catastrophe. "Emma, please," she whispered, her voice suddenly losing its sharp edge, dropping into a desperate, pleading tone that I had never heard from her in my entire life. "Think about Max's legacy. If the investors walk out, everything he built will be ruined. Do you want to see his dream destroyed just out of spite for me? Do not use my husband's name to cover up your own arrogance," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper that made her step back. Max didn't build a cold, greedy corporate machine that squeezes users for quick profits. You did that in 48 hours. You tried to erase his vision, his kindness, and his respect for the people who supported us from the beginning. You brought this ruin upon yourself. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting to the door as the investors began to step into the elevator lobby. What do you want, Emma? Money? A higher salary? Name your price. I will ensure the board approves whatever financial compensation you want. Just log into the system and clear the validation queue before those men leave the building. I stood up slowly, picking up the black leather folder from my desk. I walked around the table, stopping just inches away from her. The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted. She was no longer the wealthy, untouchable matriarch dictating my worth. She was a desperate politician begging a real operator to save her life. I don't want your money, Diane, I said softly, sliding the legal folder toward her chest. Open it. Turn to page 12. Read the operational contingency clause that Max signed into law 6 months ago. With trembling hands, she took the folder and flipped through the pages. As her eyes scanned the legal text, the last remaining bit of color completely drained from her face. Diane's eyes moved frantically across the legal text, her lips parting slightly as she read the words aloud in a breathless, terrified whisper. In the event of a critical system degradation where operational efficiency falls below 70% for 3 consecutive days, full emergency administrative control over all regional operations, financial distributions, and corporate strategy shall automatically revert to the designated operational director, Emma Turner. She dropped the folder onto my desk as if the paper had suddenly burned her fingers. She shook her head, her hands trembling so violently that her gold bracelets clattered together like chains. This is impossible, she stammered, backing away from me until her spine hit the heavy wooden office door. This isn't a valid document. Max would never sign something like this without consulting the family attorneys. He wouldn't strip his own mother of her executive authority. Max knew exactly who you were, Diane, I said, my voice low and steady as I walked closer to her. He knew that the moment he wasn't here to protect me, you would use your social standing and your board seats to crush me. He built this system to protect our life's work from your greed. You thought you were pushing me out of the company, but every single aggressive policy you implemented simply accelerated the countdown to this exact moment. She looked through the glass partition again. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and the 4 international investors stepped inside. Arthur, the lead investor, paused for a split second, looking back at my office door with a look of profound disappointment, before the silver doors slid shut, sealing the fate of Diane's massive partnership deal. The deal was dead. The corporate expansion she had promised the board was completely gone. You ruined it, Diane whispered, her voice cracked and trembling with a terrifying mixture of grief and rage. The investors are gone. The regional branches are frozen. The board will call for an emergency session by tomorrow morning, and they will vote to remove me from the acting chairwoman position. They won't just remove you, Diane, I corrected her gently, sitting back down on the edge of my desk. According to this clause, because your management decisions directly caused a critical financial audit and flagged our primary payment systems for fraud validation, you are legally liable for the operational deficit. You didn't just lose the investors. You broke the family's entire financial credibility in 48 hours. She looked at me, and for the first time since I had met her years ago, I saw true humility in her eyes. The cold, untouchable queen of the high society circle was completely gone. In her place was a broken woman who realized she had played a high-stakes game against an opponent who had already won before the first piece was even moved. "What are you going to do to me?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the low, rhythmic warning chimes still playing through the speakers. "I am going to save the company," I replied, opening my laptop and typing in a 72-digit administrative key that only Max and I possessed. "I am going to restore the original user policies, reactivate the regional customer loyalty program, and issue a public apology for the temporary administrative errors of the past 48 hours. As my fingers hit the final key, the red screen on my laptop instantly dissolved, replaced by a clean green dashboard. Outside my office, the loud warning chime stopped immediately. The frantic shouting in the administrative pool died down as the wall monitors flashed back to life, showing the transaction queue rapidly clearing itself. The machine was running smoothly again. The crisis was over. "And what about me?" Diane asked, her hands pressed against the door as if she needed it to stand upright. "You are going to step out into that corridor," I said, pointing toward the open glass door. "And you are going to tell every single employee in this building that your strategy was an amateur mistake. Then, you are going to sign the formal administrative transition papers." She stared at me, her chest heaving, realizing that her public execution was about to happen in front of the very employees she had ordered around just hours ago. Diane didn't move for a long time. She stood gripped by a paralysis that only comes when absolute pride meets absolute defeat. Through the clear glass walls of my office, 100 pairs of eyes were fixed on us. The news of the system's sudden recovery had traveled through the floor like wildfire, and every single employee now knew exactly where the power in this building truly resided. "I can't do that, Emma," Diane whispered, her voice cracking as she clutched the edge of my doorframe. "If I go out there and admit this in front of the junior staff, my standing with the remaining board members will be completely destroyed. I will be a laughingstock in our social circle." "You should have thought about your standing before you threw my presentation on the floor, Diane," I said, my voice entirely devoid of pity. "You should have thought about it before you told the executives that I belonged in a kitchen. You chose to make this a public war. Now, you have to accept the public consequences." I stood up from my desk, picking up the transition documents that my assistant, Sarah, had quietly printed out and brought to me during our conversation. I walked past Diane, stepping out into the bright open floor of the administrative pool. The entire floor fell completely silent. The typing stopped. The quiet phone conversations ended instantly. Managers, analysts, and directors all turned their chairs to face me. "Everyone, please look up," I announced, my voice clear and steady, projecting effortlessly across the large room. "As you can see, our regional infrastructure has been fully restored. The financial processing accounts are unfrozen, and our core user loyalty programs are back online. We are reverting to the original operational strategy that Max Turner and I established." A collective, audible sigh of relief swept through the room. Several junior analysts explicitly put their heads in their hands, exhaling days of built-up terror. "However," I continued, looking back toward my office door where Diane was slowly stepping out, her head bowed, her shoulders slumped. "To ensure this type of operational instability never happens again, the acting chairwoman has a statement to make regarding the future administration of Maxco." Diane walked forward as if she were stepping toward a scaffold. The expensive jewelry and the luxury suit that had looked so intimidating yesterday now seemed like a heavy, hollow armor on a broken soldier. She stopped next to me, her eyes tracking the floor, refusing to look at the employees she had threatened to fire just hours before. I want to clarify the events of the last 2 days," Diane began, her voice trembling so heavily that she had to pause to clear her throat. "The recent corporate changes were an amateur error in judgment. My team misinterpreted our system parameters. Emma Turner is the sole architect of our regional framework, and her insights are mandatory for the survival of this company." A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd. Marcus, the regional coordinator who had abandoned me in the boardroom, looked down at his desk in profound shame. "Therefore," Diane whispered, her knuckles white as she took the pen I held out to her, "I am officially signing over full operational authority and emergency administrative control to Emma, effective immediately. The board will follow her direction moving forward." She placed the document on a nearby desk and traced her signature on the dotted line. As she finished the last stroke, she dropped the pen. It rolled off the desk and clicked against the floor. Without saying another word, Diane turned around and walked toward the executive elevators. No one moved to help her. No one offered to carry her bag. She stepped into the silver car alone, the doors sliding shut on her rein before she could even look back. I looked at the signed document in my hands, feeling the heavy weight of Max's protection wrapping around me. The battle for the company's survival was won, but the true emotional closure was about to happen in the quiet space where his memory still lived. The elevator indicators clicked downward, a mechanical countdown signaling Diane's final departure from the building. For a long moment, the entire floor remained in a state of absolute, stunned silence. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The 100 employees who had spent the last 48 hours watching an empire crack were now looking at me, waiting to see what the new era would look like. Marcus was the first to step forward. He walked out from behind his coordinator desk, his head bowed, holding a printout of the restored regional metrics. "Emma," he said, his voice quiet, thick with a deep, visible shame. "I want to apologize for yesterday, for the boardroom. I should have stood up for you. I knew what you and Max built, but I let my own fear of losing my position cloud my loyalty." I looked at him for a quiet second, letting the silence rest between us. "The past 48 hours proved exactly who built this company, Marcus, and who merely occupied the chairs. I don't need your apologies. I need your absolute dedication to restoring the trust our users just lost. Get the support teams online. We have a lot of people to take care of tonight." "Right away, Emma," he said, a genuine smile breaking through his anxious face as he turned to rally his department. Within minutes, the natural, energetic rhythm of the old Maxco returned. The typing wasn't frantic anymore. It was purposeful. The conversations weren't hushed panic. They were collaborative. The cold, corporate machine Diane had tried to install had vanished, replaced by the living, breathing dream Max and I had sketched out on a greasy napkin in a diner years ago. I walked back into my office, closing the door to block out the constructive noise of the floor. I walked over to the large glass window and looked out at the sprawling city. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the concrete towers. For the first time in 3 weeks, the heavy, suffocating weight of survival lifted from my chest. The war was over. I had protected our life's work. I had forced the woman who wanted to erase me to admit her own incompetence in front of the world. I sat down in my chair, pulling the black leather folder toward me one last time. I opened the back pocket, and my fingers brushed against a small, folded piece of paper I hadn't noticed before. I carefully pulled it out and unfolded it. It was a handwritten note from Max. The ink was slightly faded, written in his messy, hurried cursive script just days before his flight to Singapore. "Emma, if you are reading this, it means the system had to protect you. I know my mother. I know how she views the world, and I know how hard she will try to make you feel small if I am not there to stand beside you. But she doesn't know what I know. She doesn't know that you are the real heartbeat of Maxco. I didn't build this empire, Emma. We did. Never let anyone make you forget your own power. I love you." A single tear finally escaped my eye, tracking slowly down my cheek and hitting the paper. It wasn't a tear of anger or humiliation anymore. It was a tear of pure, profound release. Diane had tried to use her wealth, her social circle, and her corporate power to crush me, believing that my humble beginnings made me weak. She then understood that the struggle she mocked was the exact thing that made me unbreakable. I folded the note carefully and placed it into my pocket, right against my heart. I looked back out at the glowing city. The world would remember Max Turner as a visionary, but they would also know that the woman standing right beside him was the one who kept the vision alive when the world tried to break it. Thank you so much for listening to Emma's journey tonight. It is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't inherited. It is built through resilience, intelligence, and staying true to your core values even when everyone else walks away. If you found my victory deeply satisfying, please take a second to hit that like button, subscribe to the Whispered Wrong channel, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder of their own hidden strength. Have you ever been completely underestimated by someone in a position of power, only to watch them fail spectacularly because they didn't respect your worth? Let me know your experiences in the comments below. I read every single one. If you are looking for another unforgettable story of justice and intelligent comebacks, click on the video appearing on your screen right now. Stay strong, and I will see you in the next story.